When we think of the American Wild West, certain images come to mind: saloons, cowboy versus Native American conflicts, a general sense of lawlessness, and, oddly enough, people tied to railroad tracks. But how accurate is this picture? Just how wild was the Wild West? When people talk about the Wild West, they're usually referring to the period from 1848, when the U.S. acquired these western lands, up until the early 20th century. Let's take a closer look at some of these iconic images. Saloons were indeed common, but forget the swinging doors. Most had regular doors to keep out dust and for security. Sure, there was booze, gambling, and sometimes prostitutes, but the rowdy brawls were rare. Saloons were more like social hubs, not chaotic brawling dens. Now what about the cowboys? Contrary to the legends, most were ranch hands protecting cattle from predators and thieves. While they were occasionally rough around the edges, employers were quick to fire cowboys who caused trouble. So they weren't exactly the gunslinging rebels we imagine. The reality of conflict with Native Americans was far more tragic. Most violence wasn't between cowboys and natives, but between Native Americans and the U.S. government, which wielded considerable military force in the West. People often imagine constant shootouts and robberies in these frontier towns, but in reality, crime was often limited to alcohol-related disputes. Sheriffs were few, but they had help and could call on state or federal forces if needed. And being a sheriff was mostly mundane work. As for the infamous railroad trope, it's mostly a myth. The idea of tying people to tracks became popular through dime novels, the pulp fiction of the time. In reality, it happened only a handful of times across the entire country. So, how wild was the Wild West? Sure, it had its moments, but life on the frontier was often as quiet as anywhere else. For every cowboy, there was a miner or a craftsman just living a regular life. The truth is, many frontier towns were pretty ordinary.